Welcome to Again But Better, a new podcast brought to you by the Florida State University Percussion Studio. My name is John Parks, and I'll be your host.
I'm Darcy Wright, Associate Producer.
And I'm Austin Palella, Project Coordinator.
We hope to enhance and inspire your approach to music performance and pedagogy through our experiences at Florida State. So let's get into it. Today's episode is the second in a series on ensemble rehearsal strategies and techniques, which we're calling RESPECT, Find Out What Rehearsal Time Means to Me. Enjoy.
Ending on time as well is it's like closing the book on that respect. You know, you start on time and you end on time, and then that's the complete package.
It's just respecting other people's times, and your own,
and you know, also the expectation from me to you.
Yes,
right.
You know, I'm supposed to be on it when we realize that you're holding yourself accountable to that, you know, then we know that. Well, again, the respect is there, you know. Yeah, and, you know, sometimes you do have a group that you can just sit there for a second and, you know, maybe relate something that, you know, helps the group figure something out, or maybe puts you in a place where, for me, you know, I can say, I remember a time where something like this was in front of me and this is what I tried, or this is what somebody said. But these stories do not take place in the middle of a rehearsal.
Yeah.
They come at the end when we're getting ready to get out early, and I'll take you, you know, for a second, and we'll talk about something, and I'll turn around and see, oh, it's 2:20, you're out.
Yeah.
You know, culturally, that is something that we have built.
Yeah.
You know, one of the other things that started this, and Austin, you were kind of here for some of this, but we would just have people leave the rehearsal if they weren't ready. So, you know, first rehearsal on a piece, rehearsal on a piece, or the first rehearsal of a semester, or whatever it was going to be, I would come in, run that whole routine on everybody, and then we would start up, and if somebody was having problems, at a certain point, I would just say, okay, maybe it's best that, you know, you're not in here, maybe go practice. And then I would put somebody else on that part. And then the next rehearsal, they were gone. You don't have to do that very often to make sure that everybody understands. And, you know, you don't have to scream at them. You don't have to yell at them. You can just say, you've made a choice. I'm making a choice. You know, we're going to replace you. I bet it won't ever happen again.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and I think that's part of that expectation level too. It's like, and, you know, I've had, Salmons will tell you, man, he was here for, I don't know if he told you guys that whole story, but, and I won't say who it was, but if he's listening to this, he'll know who it is. I mean, this guy was in the Navy band finals as a sophomore when he was here.
I know who you're talking about.
And, yeah, he's amazing. I mean, he's one of the most naturally gifted players I ever had. But, so Mike Salmons was here, and this was after we played PASIC the first time, and he was teaching seminar and watching lessons and doing all this stuff. It was really awesome to have him here. It was the beginning of our friendship. And we were talking, and he was saying, well, what do you do when students aren't prepared for rehearsal? And I was like, they're never not prepared for rehearsal, which, of course, as soon as I said that, I invited this situation. So anyway, we come in, and it was the first rehearsal on Diabolic Variations. Okay. Anybody who knows that piece knows that it is a lot of notes, and it's really, really challenging, and it's a very touchy piece. You've really got to know what you're doing in order to get through it. So, of course, we get in, and he was playing one of the parts, and it just was not happening. And Salmons is right there beside me. I'm conducting, and I can just see him thinking, like, I can see the thought balloon above his head, like, let's see what you do now, you know. And so we tried a couple more times, and I just looked at him, and I said, I think your time is better spent going to practice. So why don't you go do that, and then we'll all work on the stuff that we're going to work on. Well, and this is like one of the most responsible people I had. He just got caught on a week that he wasn't able to put in. We've all been there.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
100%.
we've all been there. But what that does for not just that group, but for years after that, the story of it kind of turns into something. And then people know that I cannot come in unprepared, or this is what's going to happen to me. And it's not really about being yelled at or being singled out or anything.
Experience.
It's like, this is the contract. Yeah. You know, if you're not going to honor it, then you're going to have to go figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, but that doesn't always fly, but it did that time.
It comes back to the respecting of the time, you know. This is the time we have for this. It's set up for us to get something done together. If you can't do your part in it, then you're wasting your colleagues' time, you're wasting the ensemble's time, and it's a waste of your time because you fumbling around with the part for the next hour or whatever, it just isn't going to get anywhere. You might as well go practice it so that we can either fix it for next time, or if that's going to be a continued issue, then you'll be replaced on the part. And it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't need to be draconian. It doesn't need to be, it's not personal, but we're all here to accomplish a similar goal.
But and that's the other part too. Like, I think the expectation part, like, the rehearsal schedule for this group, even in a non-convention, non-PASIC or Lassiter Symposium semester, is like 3 weeks in advance.
At least, yeah.
I mean, you know exactly what's going to be when, who's coaching it. When I'm going to be in there, when a teaching assistant is going to be coaching it. Like, all of these things so far in advance, and that again is kind of that's a respect thing. I'm not going to not tell you what we're rehearsing and then have you run. I mean, I can't imagine a worse situation than you being all set up for every single thing that we could possibly rehearse. Like, if you didn't know.
Right.
And I mean, we can't operate that way. No, we can't.
Inefficient.
No, it is inefficient, and it's frustrating, and especially when you have a short rehearsal sequence. Like, a real rehearsal sequence for a professional group is literally just a few days.
Right.
And then concert, and sometimes other rehearsals are going on for another show that may be happening around the same time. I mean, it's a lot. And if everyone is not ready to go and you waste time waiting for people or waiting for people to talk constantly, then your ratio and your ability to prepare at a really high level is severely handicapped.
Right.
And maybe for some people, they feel like from an educational perspective that there's some kind of balance between both. Like, they need to spend time talking about things. This is why I conduct this way through here, because there are people in the group that want to do this one day, and they need to have some insight into how he does it. I would suggest that instead of taking rehearsal time to do that, what you should do is videotape the rehearsal and have, audio recording, have everything, and then sit down with the students that need to look at that stuff and talk over it as you're watching it together.
Yeah.
So you're not actually wasting time.
Yeah.
You're making music constantly, and then you can go back and say, now the reason that I do this, the reason I make this gesture is because I'm trying to elicit this response. Great.
Yeah.
And that is something that I think is really interesting. Terry has said this to me. Well, she said it to me, but she's also used it as an example. Tell me what time it is. Don't tell me how the watch is made. On the other hand, though, and I can hear people even through the interwebs saying it's something like that. Well, no, that's not how it is at all. People need to understand how a clock works. Yes, they do, but you don't need to take rehearsal time to figure out how the clock works. You figure out how the clock works on your own time, and you ask questions about the clock working to the clock master.
Right.
The conductor, whoever it is, outside, and when you get in there, you tell me what time it is.
Yeah.
That feels more like private lesson also kind of material.
Yeah.
That's when you're there to learn how to create your own clock or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the same thing. You and I have talked about this before. It's like, don't read the menu to me.
Right.
Don't hand it to me and read it to me.
Right.
Just hand it to me.
Right.
Yeah.
And I will tell you what I want.
Exactly.
And I think that's true for what we do too. Like, I'm not going to get in there and say, okay, today we're going to do blah, 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 blah. What I'll do instead is I'll tell you at the end of rehearsal what we're doing on the next time. Hey, next time we come to this, we're going to do the first half tempo. We're going to work on this and this and this. And here's what I want you to think about. Here's what I want you to listen to. Go do it. And then you come back in and we do it. But what normally happens is that I say that, and then I come in and just kick you off at full tempo and forget that I said to do it at half or whatever it is. I know. I'll tell you what it's going to be. And, I actually got that from John Lynch, who, I don't know if you guys know John. He's a band conductor, wind conductor. He's awesome. I was on the search committee that hired him at Kansas, and we got to work together for 1 year before I left, and then he went to Georgia, and then he went to Australia, and I remember they were doing, I think it's Dance of Something. It's a Russian transcription, and maybe somebody will put it in the comments or something and say, how could you not know this? But I can't remember at the moment. But it had this absolutely insane xylophone part. But I remember that on the rehearsal schedule, and one of my students got the part, was like, oh my God. But on the rehearsal schedule, he put that it would be in the second week, the second rehearsal slot at this tempo.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, now that's good education.
Yeah.
That's not how it really works. when you get out of school.
No.
But what a great way to say, all right, here's what you do. But then as you get to know the group better, and as he got to know the group better and they got to know him better, they were able to start compressing that down to, all right, here's what we're doing next week. It's that tempo.
Yeah. Right. You know? But what a great way to build a rock solid foundation, you know? And when I was younger, I remember that we did that too. It would be half the piece, slightly under, so we could really hear what was going on.
Yeah.
We were slightly less experienced on average. But as this program has grown, you don't need to do that.
No.
But
if you pace it right.
Right.
I think.
But I think that was a great way to start a rock solid foundation for the program.
Yeah.
I also wanted to say, just because you had said briefly about how basically 3 weeks out it's performance ready. But the great thing about that, and I think a lot of people actually miss on this, they think the new trend is peaking at the right time, right? And I would say it's new just because in that it's much more well known now.
Whether especially it's when you have 16 rehearsals for a concert, you know, which is crazy, but it does exist places.
And I think that's great. And you do want to peak at the right time. But if you get caught up in thinking that the peak is only playing the part well or what's on the page only at the concert, then you miss the point where you get done with what's on the page and now you can get seriously creative.
The actual
and
growth.
You can really make it sparkle.
Yeah.
Right? And that is part of why we're able, I think, to do that pretty regularly because we have the black and white stuff done weeks ahead of time. And now we can get into
usually.
Often it's, week one, but certainly after just a couple weeks, it's like now what can we really say with this? And that's what makes it art. Yeah. That's what makes it special. Not just here, for everywhere.
Well, and I think anybody who watched that show, especially in November, that was a takeaway.
Right.
And a large part of that was just due to some serious rehearsal planning, some very careful part assigning, working with arrangers and composers that were open to us doing the kinds of things that we wanted to do with it. Not just the sparkle stuff, but, cutting this here, adding this there, changing this here, doing those kinds of things. And I'm sure you guys remember, like, if we were not in rehearsal, all I was doing was listening to the recordings of rehearsals and sending you copious notes. But I was also thinking, hey, this is what we could do next time to fix this problem or to address this one thing. And then I would tell you ahead of time, and then we would get in, and then we would do it.
Right.
And it wasn't like, like, I need you guys to line up at this point. It was like, I need you to change mallets. I need you to change articulate. Like, it was like the smallest details. Yeah. Like, nitty gritty stuff that makes it sparkle.
But that's awesome because if you use your rehearsal time efficiently, you do get past the page fast.
Yeah.
And then you can work on those kinds of things. And I would suggest that, we do this all the time. It's not just convention stuff. Like any of our live shows have been cooked for a while, and we know exactly what we hope that it's going to taste like when it comes out of the oven. Like this episode? Let us know your thoughts. The Again But Better team includes Associate Producer Darcy Wright, Project Coordinator Austin Palella, editing and production by Tallahassee Photo and Video, also known as the amazing Justin Ball, and I'm your host, John Parks. See you next time for another episode of Again But Better.